This is page 211. This is the learning page. There's no math questions, but there's definitely a lot of learning. So let's go through this. Feel free to take notes and ask questions. Writing fractions as decimals and percents. Read along with me. You can write some fractions as percents by writing an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. This method is useful when the fraction has a denominator that is a factor or a multiple of 100. If a fraction does not have a denominator that is a factor or multiple of 100, you can use long division. So we're going to show you two different examples. One where the denominator is compatible with 100, and one where the denominator is not compatible with 100. And if you don't understand what I'm saying yet, you probably will at the conclusion of these two examples. So if you go to example 2, I think I'm going to I like to cover up what they have in the book here. A reads, 96 out of 200 animals treated by a veterinarian are horses. Write 96 out of 200 as a decimal and as a percent. So if you just write this as a fraction, 96 out of 200. Go back to, what does this percent mean? What does this word mean? I've emphasized it in previous lessons. Percent means literally out of 100. Now if you memorize what that means, it's going to help you figure out a strategy. So go back to our fraction of 96 200ths. What we're going to do here is we're going to use an equivalent ratio to figure out of 100. Because what does percent mean? It means out of 100. So our strategy is to go find the percent by making it a fraction out of 100. And then we ask ourselves, what happened to get our second term, 200, to change to 100? Well, we divided by 2. And so if you divide the second term by 2, you have to divide the first term by 2. So we're going to figure out a percent here by doing 96 divided by 2, which is 48. And 48 100ths is 48 in the hundredths place, and it is 48%. The question asks for two things. It asks for the decimal, and it asks for as a percent. So the answer is 48 hundredths and 48%. That's how we do that. The reason why, if you think, wow, that was pretty easy, the reason why that was easy is because our denominator here was a multiple of 100. So it's I use the word compatible. If the denominator is compatible with 100, it's pretty simple. Example B is a little bit more complicated because it says 1 to 8, 1 over 8. 1/8 of the animals treated by the veterinarian are dogs. Write 1/8 as a decimal and a percent. If we try that same strategy here, like the exact same strategy, how do we make 8 turn into 100? Well, if you look at a multiplication chart, you'll recognize that 8 does not evenly go into 100. In other words, 8 is not a factor nor a multiple of 100. So this strategy actually doesn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and ditch that. And so what we do instead is we use long division. Use long division to divide the numerator by the denominator. Now this is what we do when you do a test. When you want to figure out your score on a test, you take your numerator and you divide it by your denominator. So 1 divided by 8, actually what that means is 1 divided by 8. Now that looks funny, except for we're going to get our answer in the form of a decimal anyway. So what we're going to do here is we're going to turn 1 into 1.00, and we're going to annex decimals until we finish the division. In other words, 8 doesn't go into 1. That's okay. But it does go into 10 once. 1 times 8 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. I'm almost done. 20 minus 16 is 4. Annex and drop this 0. 8 goes into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40. When I get a remainder of 0, like I have here, that means I'm done. It means we have terminated. It means I'm done. So my answer is 0.125, which that's acceptable as a decimal. We're supposed to write this as a decimal. We're also supposed to write it as a percent. And this gets a little bit tricky. This is not 125%. This is actually 12.5%. And the reason why is because the word percent means out of 100, but our answer here is out of 1,000. So what we do is we place our decimal point right here after the hundredths place. And so now we end up with 12.5%. 1/8 is equal to 0. And I kind of got to get rid of this decimal that I put right here. 1/8 is equal to 0.125, which is 12.5%. Now this is one that's probably going to be worth memorizing because we're going to ask about eighths later. We're going to ask about 1/8, we're going to ask about 3/8, we're going to ask about 5/8, and it's always going to be it's typically going to be something that ends in a decimal, like 12.5%. Okay, well, good job on page 211. Let's go ahead and go practice those kinds of problems on page 212.